Andrew, we got news from the Supreme Court today that surprised some folks here. It's clearing the way for an immediate expansion when it comes to same-sex marriage. High Court turning away appeals from 5 different states looking to prohibit gay and lesbian marriage, and the order immediately ends delays in Indiana, Oklahoma, Utah, Virginia, and Wisconsin. You got same-sex couples in Colorado, Kansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, Wyoming. They should also now be able to get married shortly. The ruling would make same-sex marriage legal in 30 states, including D.C. We always talk about the velocity of this issue. We talk about the significance of this ruling, or non-ruling.
There's 2 points to everything that happened with the Supreme Court today. The first is, as you mentioned, 30 states will now have marriage equality on the books. And it's clear that we've passed the tipping point. And at some point in the not too distant future, it will be legal across the entire country, all 50 states. However, the process which the Supreme Court went with all the big ticket cases they've been willing to take, even things like Citizens United where they've gone beyond the scope of the lawsuits that were brought to them, what they did today was just basically punt on this decision. So in order for the other 20 states to come on board with marriage equality, it will now have to go through circuit courts and appeals courts, which it will, and eventually get to the Supreme Court, and you might get the same thing that happened today. So it sort of slows down the process. It's also, to my mind, kind of a chicken move by the Supreme Court today. I mean, why not just deal with this head on and make this ruling one way or another, considering the nature that this court has taken? So it's a major step forward for the country, in my estimation, but it's also kind of a step back for the Supreme Court. This is the first of many, many high-profile issues the court's going to take this session.
I agree with everything you said, but if we step back for a second, and I said, let's say 2 years ago, that in 2014, 30 states in America would recognize same-sex marriage and everything attached to it, you'd say no. It has moved so quickly. This
I would have
issue.
asked you, what are you smoking?
Exactly. Now, Gina, I'm curious your take on this one, because you remember this. Governor Cuomo, he basically has run a non-campaign campaign, if you will, have surrogates put things out, run ads here, go after his opponent, but he certainly hasn't been very revealing on the trail. But he went to church services at the Greater Allen AME Cathedral in Queens on Sunday. The governor opened up to the congregation about his failed run for governor, bitter fight with then state comptroller H. Carl McCall, and his divorce with Kerry Kennedy. Cuomo thanked Reverend Floyd Flake for helping him get through those times. And he was quoted as saying, "I was at bottom. I was lower than low. I had professional loss. I had personal problems. I can count on one hand how many people who put their hand out, and Reverend Flake was one of those people who gave me a second chance." He was in a tough spot, made a lot of enemies in terms of how he handled. Carl McCall also said some intemperate remarks, you can even say, about then Governor Pataki, that always was called code here, I remember at the time, for Rudy Giuliani at the time. And then obviously that public humiliating divorce that he had with Kerry Kennedy. Interesting that he chose to open up even a little bit, because that's not his MO.
Yeah, no, it's surprising, very surprising to hear from the governor, because we, as you mentioned, we don't even hear him campaigning really, let alone speaking personally ever. And this is somebody who doesn't like to open up publicly, and yet we heard him saying this. You know, it's also important to note that Reverend Flake is an important figure in New York politics. So it's not a surprise that he opens up there, and there is a political motive here. Publicly thanks the Reverend for all his support. I mean, this is something of a kingmaker, and if he was as supportive as the governor says, it's not too much of a surprise. This is also the son of the former very popular governor. So you want to talk about putting your really support behind somebody who has potential. It would have been Andrew Cuomo. So I wasn't too surprised by the thank you.
You know, Richard, the professor hit it head on. To be in front of Reverend Flake, I've been to his services at Allen many times. He is so popular, he has 3 services every Sunday. Normally one at 8 a.m., 11:30, and then I think 1 p.m. And when you're there in front of him, and he starts with his sermon, and he starts almost like the Spirit has caught him, and it looks like he's dancing, delivering the sermon, it's very hard not to open up and be emotional. And so with the governor there in front of core Democratic voters, I can see where Cuomo would do that.
Dominic, if you could, how he really rubbed a lot of people in the African-American community the wrong way when it really was McCall. Remind people who don't remember that story.
You are 1,000% correct. Andrew Cuomo, I almost said Mario, Andrew Cuomo was considered the walking dead. That's how bad it was. And here's why. The first African-American had a shot at becoming governor. It was Carl McCall. It was believed to be impossible that an African American could get that position, could be in that position. And then here comes Andrew Cuomo, and he goes, "Get out of my way. I want the nomination." Democrats were livid. And the only reason why Cuomo dropped out at the 11th hour is every poll in the state showed that he would lose to McCall. And so he was considered dead on arrival, roadkill, everything you can think of.
And some people thought
that was
he
Andrew
hurt
Cuomo.
McCall's
Right.
chances to be governor, which he obviously eventually lost.
And so those two hated each other for a very long time, McCall and Andrew Cuomo. But the story of redemption, Cuomo, and then his marriage, you know, it was played out in the tabloids of his wife having an affair and him allegedly not making child support payments. That was a mess as well.
You know, if I didn't know any better, I would think from the timing of this, we were maybe a month away from Election Day. I mean, it almost seems suspicious.
But it does not fit his MO, Andrew, how he's conducted the campaign to this point, which is to reveal and say absolutely nothing, not even recognize the name of your opponent, for him to at least acknowledge or choose to acknowledge about his both failed marriage, about his failed campaign before, about mistakes he had made. That's not him.
Except that when he does so on his own terms, in his own venue, in
Absolutely.
a place where he can't be questioned. I
Yep.
mean, it's all part of the story of Andrew Cuomo and how
But
he runs politics.
you got to go to Allen and to Allen AME Church, and then you'll understand. Because I guarantee you, if you go, you'll get up and start giving your testimony as well.
And you know, he does owe gratitude to the
Preach
African
on, Brother
American.
Andrew, yeah.
He does owe gratitude.
Yeah.
Look at the primary. He did much better among African Americans and
Yeah.
minority voters than did Zephyr Teachout. So he has a lot of gratitude. He should have a lot of gratitude.
This one caught my attention. Now, Pope Francis, as we know, among other things, urging bishops speak their minds on issues like contraception, homosexuality, marriage, divorce. Pope told bishops that they should not fear showing him disrespect and that he wants a frank debate on issues that some believe are too taboo to be discussed. And it's interesting. On Sunday, I saw Frank Bruni had done a piece in the Times. You may have seen the Recon Review, where he talks about how gay members of whether they're in choir or whatever else, they've been still driven out. And I'm talking the last 12 months here at different churches around the country. Meanwhile, divorce, which is supposedly taboo, whatever, people having second, third, fourth marriages, whatever, church, in many cases, without exception, there are certain things that are okay and not okay, seemingly. Well, I get Dom's text as I'm walking to Max about Mr. Rubenstein, and then I hear a homily where I'm told any candidate that's in effect pro-choice, or any candidate because of Obamacare and because of religious institutions, whether they be schools or hospitals, whatever, if they want the funding, federal funding, well, Obamacare carries with it contraception as an offer. You should vote against those people. Now, here's my issue. I accept and I understand the church's position as it relates to the issues of choice. However, what bothers me to no end is I thought the church was against the death penalty. When's the next time I ever hear the church tell me to vote against somebody who supports the death penalty will be the first time. My church, suppose, believes into feeding the hungry and clothing the naked. When's the last time I heard to vote against an elected official who cut funding for welfare or other programs here to help the needy? It's the selectivity, Jeannie, and I know we're of the same faith here, that always bothers me. Don't inject politics on Sunday. If you choose to be uniform across the board here. It's just the selective issues that they like and don't like as to who they're going to threaten to actually not give communion to on Sunday. Remember, we see that every 4 years in a presidential race. That to me irks me to no end, because people are choosing to use Sundays for politics when it doesn't belong at the pulpit. It's like a broken record.
Yeah.
And the Pope's saying otherwise, but it doesn't seem to always filter down to the parish.
Well, and I think it's going to take a long time to filter down. I mean, he's a new pope, I think, these messages. But another issue of grave concern this election season is immigration. And this is something where the Catholic Church really stands with, if you have to categorize it, the left. And they do not speak out necessarily in the way that you mentioned for people who want to put up a wall and those kinds of things. And many nuns and priests are doing incredible work harboring people from the government who are supposed to be sent back as, quote unquote, illegal immigrants, so that families aren't separated. So to your point, I mean, I think it's an absolutely fair point. What we've had for a long time in this country is the Catholic bishops coming out every 4 years with election messages and kind of this election, edict where they tell Catholics how they should vote and what they should consider. And there's many...
Which isn't even consistent with the teaching, is my only point.
Yeah.
I prefer it not be injected at all.
And
That's
it's-
not
yeah.
why people go to church on Sunday, my personal belief. But if you're going to do it, be consistent without your own personal dogma, but look at least what the church is laying out for if you're going to make Sundays about that. That's what...
And it's not consistent with what most American Catholics at
Right.
least believe, and that's been a big problem for the Catholic Church.
Contraception? Really? Really? You should check with the laity, I think, on that one. All right. Thank you. When we come back here, we will switch gears. Take a look at a new report out on the controversial issue of fracking. Why it says the Cuomo administration delayed releasing a key study. And Andrew today spoke to a Capital New York reporter who broke that very story. We'll have that conversation more after this.